guys, what's up? So since I'm always talking about the differences between strength training and hypertrophy training, I just want to cover some of those in this video and how it actually applies for us taller lifters here. The first thing in which strength training and hypertrophy training differ, and this is actually a really crucial factor here, and they differ in their goal. In the last, I don't know, maybe 5 years, people have started to mix strength training with hypertrophy training, and people think that if you're natural, that you have to focus on strength to gain muscle mass. That is in some way true, but it's not completely, and it's really pulled out of the context. I really want to explain this as simple as possible, but this is actually a pretty, huge topic. So the first thing about strength is that strength isn't just about muscle mass. So when you are training for strength, you can actually train to not gain muscle. You can focus on singles, on doubles, on really low volume, and actually pretty low frequency, and you can actually gain strength without gaining muscle. Actually, in some context, you can actually lose muscle when you are training specifically for strength. So your 1 rep max can temporarily increase, while temporarily your muscle mass can actually decrease. One example of this would be if I was now focusing half a year specifically for hypertrophy. So I was doing pretty high volume, I was doing exercises that are specific for hypertrophy, that have longer range of motion, that target the muscles much better. And after this period of time, I say, okay, now I am not really primed for strength, because I have been doing mostly higher volume. My fatigue is probably a little bit higher because I was doing higher volume, but my muscle mass is higher. And if I decide to specifically try to increase my 1 rep max, I would start doing completely different program. So if I have been focusing for the last 6 months on hypertrophy, and now I drop my volume, I increase my intensity, depending on the exercise I will decrease or increase my frequency, and of course I will not train arms anymore, and my training will be more specific toward the lifts in which I want to gain strength in. So people automatically assume when we talk about strength that we talk about powerlifting, which is not the case. You can actually gain strength in, I don't know, in some stupid exercise, But in this context, we're going to cover powerlifting because it is the most common example. If you are doing more shoulder work, more back work, more arm work, more quad specific work, more hamstring specific work, when you are training for hypertrophy, and now you start training for strength, and you start to specify your training toward a goal of lifting as much weight as possible for 1 rep max, that is pretty different goal and pretty different approach, and you are basically doing everything different than when you are training for hypertrophy. When you are training for hypertrophy, you are specifically trying to find exercises that are targeting the muscles that you want to target. But when you are training for powerlifting, you have to do anything you need to lift as much weight as possible for 1 rep max. If you are actually a powerlifting athlete, you are competing in powerlifting, you don't have to just lift this weight anytime, anywhere. If you are a real powerlifter, you have to train and you have to design your block to actually lift this weight on a specific date. Not just anywhere, anytime, when you feel good. You have to actually drop your fatigue and increase your intensity, increase your fitness levels before the actual competition. So, how does this relate to hypertrophy training? It doesn't. When you are training for hypertrophy, you are basically trying to do as much volume as possible in exercises that you want, that are targeting your muscles the best. So for example, for hypertrophy, a really short range, really wide grip bench isn't really the best thing to do for your chest. However, probably better exercise for your chest would be incline bench, would be dumbbell bench for some people no. The way you know what exercises are better for you is by actually doing them and tracking your results. There isn't any other way around it. So for powerlifting, if you are a powerlifter, when you're trying to chase strength, also one of the main differences is that you want to practice your lift. You want to get actually good at your lift. You want to get good at the squat. And you want to find as efficient technique as possible you want to do in the squat to actually lift the most weight as possible. But when you are training for hypertrophy, you don't want to do a technique which allows you to lift as much weight as possible. It doesn't make any sense. In the squat, primarily, when you're training for hypertrophy, you want to train your quads. Maybe your glutes, your hamstrings work a little bit, but the main focus in squat, when you are training for hypertrophy, is to actually grow your quads. Growing is your goal when you are training for hypertrophy. Strength is your goal when you are training for strength. The goals are different. Now, here is the thing where most people and almost everyone who is a beginner and who doesn't really know this topic actually gets confused. Because people, when we are talking about hypertrophy, people talk about progressive overload. People talk about gaining strength, and the surest way to gain muscle is to actually gain strength. But you have to put these things into context. If you are doing like super short range of motion bench, or you are doing like super low bar squat, those exercises are actually not good at targeting your muscles. It doesn't really matter what you believe, that's just the fact. If you are super leaning forward when you're doing squat, and you are actually training more your glutes and maybe your hamstrings in the squat than your quads, and the goal when you are training for hypertrophy is actually to train your quads, that's not optimal for hypertrophy. Also, when you are training for hypertrophy, it's not in your interest to do heavy stuff, because heavy stuff is super taxing on your body. Why that is important is because you are spending your recovery resources on something that doesn't really matter in your hypertrophy. So the major difference here in exercise selection is that you want to pick exercises that target your muscles really good, that train your muscles, and in the same way that are not super taxing. So for example, doing triples in super heavy low bar squat is super taxing on your body, especially if you're a tall lifter, especially because taller lifters are not usually built for squats. That's just a fact. This isn't the rule. It's not like you're not ever gonna find somebody who is tall and who is good in squats, but taller guys usually are not talented in squats. That's just a fact. And by that, you have to have in mind that in general, when you're doing heavy triples, doesn't really matter if you're tall or not, especially if you're tall, but it doesn't really matter if you're tall or not. You are literally wasting your time on doing triples if you want to gain muscle mass specifically in your quads. So also, between exercise selection, you have to pick exercises that really target your muscles. And for example, low bar versus high bar squat. If you can't do high bar squat, you have a million other exercises for your quads. It's not like squat is some magical exercise that is going to give you all of the gains in your quads. For example, some programming differences between training for strength and training for hypertrophy. Actually, strength training has a specific period of time that is actually a little bit more focused for hypertrophy. So, I mean, even when you are training for strength, you have periods of time when you are specifically focusing on different exercises that target your muscles more than the 3 power lifts. So, I mean, that there is only practically the proof that strength training is not specific for hypertrophy, because even powerlifters and strength athletes have periods of time where they are actually focusing on hypertrophy. that's where they gain most of their muscle mass. And for people who think that, oh, you just need to progress in strength, man, and that's it. Yeah, I mean, you will gain some strength if you are training for hypertrophy specifically, especially if you're a beginner. If you're a beginner, you can just hang on the fucking bar and you will gain strength and mass in your back. You know, you can just do some push-ups and you will gain mass if you're a beginner. But as you get more and more and more and more advanced, you have to start specifying your training. You have to start writing down your goals. You have to start actually thinking more about training. It's not just about training, it's about everything in life, but in training especially. Because if you're a natural lifter, you literally have much more limited resources, recovery capabilities than somebody who is on drugs. And we, who are naturals here, we have to really focus on one thing at a time. It is my belief that it's better for you to focus on one thing than to actually, like, you know, you can go to the gym. I'm not judging. You can go to the gym, you can train a little bit for strength, you can train a little bit for muscle mass, you can, you know, carry some stuff here and there. I mean, I am doing those kinds of things in my backyard already because, you know, I'm working some stuff physically. And I'm actually riding my bicycle and all of that. But if you are doing those kind of unspecific training routines, you cannot say that that is better than the actual strength training routine that is specifically tailored for strength and hypertrophy training routine that is specifically tailored for hypertrophy. And as I said before, strength training is also, it also has a huge skill component, because if you want to start training for strength, you can actually be at the same level of muscle mass and you can increase your strength, because strength training is not one-to-one correlated with muscle mass. You have tons of powerlifters that look like shit and they can lift a lot of weight, you know, and I'm talking about naturals here. You have a lot of amateur powerlifters that can lift more weight than me and they look like shit. That's just a fact, you know. And you have a lot of powerlifters that look good, but they would look even better, even more, they would be even bigger and they would look even better if they started focusing on hypertrophy specifically. But because they're talented in lifting weights in general, they are just focusing on, you know, powerlifting, for example. But I could go on about this topic forever, and I just wanted to, you know, turn on the camera and just say some stuff about this, just, you know, so you can just try to roast me in the comments below, because some of you actually think that I have never been to the gym, obviously. And, you know, check out my website. You can download my free PDF. It's actually free. There is a lot of stuff inside. It is 30 pages long. It's not just the program. You have my program that I'm actually pretty much doing currently. And yeah, so subscribe also, like if you like, don't like if you didn't, and I don't care. Bye.